Hello, you're listening to the Getting Smart podcast, and I am Nate McLennan. Today, we're diving into the second part of our three-part series on unbundled learning. So, for those of you who are avid listeners, we talked to a bunch of folks from Colorado with the Reschool Colorado, Jeffco Open School, and Colorado Succeeds, thinking about how to meet workforce needs and expand learning opportunities beyond the school walls in Colorado. So, if you haven't yet listened to that podcast, please start with that podcast. Then come to today's pod, which is on Arizona. We'll think about unbundling in Arizona. We have some great guests today. And then the third part of the series will be the last one around New Hampshire. We'll move east United States to New Hampshire, which has done some great work since 2005 in opening up extended and expanded learning opportunities for young people. So before we start into our conversation, I want to just step back and look at the different levels of education unbundling. We wrote about this in our white paper, and you can find that online, but really thinking about the different parts or different ways someone can unbundle. In a typical classroom, a teacher is always unbundling unless they're in a very prescriptive school where curriculum is mandated and the exact time and way that you need to teach it is mandated. Teachers have been unbundling and modifying and adapting content, personalizing learning, and sometimes in partnership with the learner for a long time. That's just good teaching practice. And so that's unbundling at the curriculum level. And then the second tier up is unbundling at the course level. And certainly with the rise of online courses, both for secondary and also dual enrollment, learners are choosing. They're choosing to take courses that might not normally be offered in the on-site physical location in their school. And so that's unbundled the course options for students. And this also has applications in all the ed tech products. Like Khan Academy is one of the most well-known ones where teachers are supplementing courses or even replacing courses with ed tech products themselves. So we have curriculum, then you have course. The third level is around school, and this is around school choice and private and public charters and magnet schools and anything in between. And then, of course, the recent accelerations in ESAs, just like it's happening here in Arizona, ESA-funded schools where money can backpack to the students and the students' families for them to then go and create stackable type learning experiences, as well as vouchers. And even in the public system where you have schools within schools where students are choosing a micro school or an academy within an individual school. And so the school is the third level of places to unbundle. And then the fourth level is this idea of an ecosystem where learning can happen anywhere in school or out of school. And the learner themselves are driving and stacking together a number of different experiences to put them together into a coherent and outcome-driven learning journey. So what's the goal? The goal is to ensure that every learner meets the expected or required outcomes. If you're not in the public sector, they're the expected. If they're in the public sector, they're the required, such as standards and competencies and things like that. In a manner where they're challenged with relevant experiences and they feel like that they belong, so that they can reach their full potential professionally, civically, and personally. So that's the goal is when we're thinking about unbundling is that there's the curriculum level, the course level, the school level, and this ecosystem level. And today, super excited to be joined by a handful of guests from Arizona who are thinking about how do we create learning experiences that are beyond and broader than what might exist in a more traditional classroom to reach more students and give them stronger experiences to get them ready for personal and professional success. So Jennifer Meller, Chief Innovation Officer at the Greater Phoenix Chamber, representing not only the workforce, but also they do a bunch of work in K-12. Chad Gestson, Executive Director of the Arizona Institute for Ed and the Economy at Northern Arizona University, so representing higher ed. But also Chad was the previous superintendent of Phoenix Union High School District, which has done a number of opportunities in that district to unbundle. And then Whitney Marsh, Chief of Staff at ASU Prep, public charter network inside ASU, Arizona State University as an authorizer. And they do everything from bricks and mortar public charter schools to an fully online charter school, as well as a number of different opportunities in between. So ASU Prep is doing all sorts of pilots and modifications and innovations to help create different models for learning. Welcome, Jennifer. Welcome, Chad. And welcome, Whitney, to the podcast today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So we're going to start with my favorite question, and I'm going to ask you to respond to it in the Twitter version because I know each one of these stories could go on for hours. But when we think about unbundling, I'd like you to take a step back in your own experience, in your own K-12 experience when you were a student, and what was an unbundled learning experience where you were highly engaged and you also learned a lot. Sometimes we can be engaged and not learn a lot. So both those things were true. So Jennifer, I'm going to start with you. Take us down memory lane and talk to us about an experience.
As I was growing up, my father was a serial entrepreneur, and he had a variety of businesses from a grocery store to a catering company to a popcorn manufacturing company. And it was an expectation that all of us kids were going to work in one of those environments. And I learned so much from that experience, just employability skills and how to navigate customer service, the importance of showing up on time, making sure you have integrity in your work. There were so many things that I learned working alongside my dad and my family members that supplemented my education and prepared me for the future workforce.
That's amazing. I don't think I've ever had a podcast where someone's parent was a popcorn entrepreneur. So that's fantastic. That's the first for me. And
I was the popcorn princess.
And the other thing that's amazing is that we're trying to think about entrepreneurial experiences for young people all the time. And you had one embedded in your sort of family and the way that they were operating their lives. Great. And we know that there's tons of learning that happens. So thank you for that. So Whitney, next, what's in the history for you?
Thanks, Nate. Great question. So the first thing that comes to mind is actually a class that I signed up for my junior year of high school at Highland High in Gilbert Public Schools here in Arizona. It was a community service course. And I signed up because you were released 7th hour of the day, which sounded awesome as a junior in high school. But you had to clock 180 hours over the 2 semesters in community service projects. And it was whatever you want to make it. So you can find one project that you're working on all the time, a place that you're serving, volunteering, ad hoc projects. And that's really what got me, one, interested in education, but two, interested in education policy, being in schools and seeing how things were working and asking, why are we doing it like this? And so got to experience a lot of different volunteer organizations and work and found a passion of mine in doing that. And it was really self-directed. So unique opportunity. And I think my experience looked very different than the other experiences that students had, just showcasing that autonomy we had to go and find a way to, one, complete the hours that we needed to, but also find purpose in something that interested us.
Yeah, I love that, especially the idea of purpose, right? I think sometimes service can be relegated to hour completion and check off the list. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that you got to see and experience a lot of different places that had purpose, which often, unfortunately, young people aren't seeing that very much in their typical classes or courses that they're taking. Chad, finish this up. What do you have to share?
Yeah, and I think I'll do 2 quick ones because it relates to both Jennifer and Whitney. So number one, in high school, my family owned a construction company. I'm a 4th generation carpenter by trade. So I grew up in the trade, working weekends, nights, fall break, spring break, and learned a valuable skill and all the types of soft skills that Jennifer mentioned earlier. Certainly being a carpenter has helped me in my adult years as I become a homeowner. And as also, by the way, my carpentry I worked full time while going to the University of Washington in Seattle to put myself through college. So an incredible skill set. But while I was at the University of Washington in Seattle, I ended up joining what was called the Inner Pipeline Project, which was UW students working in Seattle public schools and getting out and applying what we learned in classrooms. I was not an education major, but that unbundled experience at UW and Seattle public schools is actually why I'm now in Arizona in the educational system.
Outstanding. Yeah, I think that every young person should have some sort of construction experience so that they can do all the things that they want to do in their houses or elsewhere without feeling too much nervousness around it. So YouTube can only go so far is my theory. I'll share quickly mine. I've had a lot of unbundled experiences, but one of the things that I think was really profound for me. So I grew up on a small farm, which I've talked about on this podcast before. But in the backyard, we built a lot of forts. And so super unorganized, nothing official. It wasn't anybody supervising. And I think I learned a lot in elementary school from building forts, from architecture, from construction materials, from warmth, because we go out in the winter as well and see if they were still standing, to collaboration with my 3 brothers who were constantly either building or tearing down each other's forts. So appreciate everybody sharing there and thinking about the unbundled work that we're going to dive into today. We'll go in reverse order here. And so I think I would like to start with, what's the challenge that you're trying to solve? And that could be your current organization. It could be in your life if you've had multiple roles in different places. But what are you trying to solve to help address learning and expand opportunities for young people? And Chad, we'll start with you. Maybe just a quick bit about What is your organization, the challenge that it's trying to solve?
Yeah, I spent 22 years inside the K-12 system, the last 8 years as superintendent of Arizona's largest high school system, and had incredible experiences. In fact, I met both Whitney and Jennifer during my tenure in Phoenix Union. And all while I was there, I saw this incredible need and I think an opportunity to, from a statewide perspective, better connect education and the economy, and specifically business and industry, higher ed, and pre-K 12. That there are incredible examples of high school to business and industry partnerships, higher ed to business and industry, high schools to higher ed, but to think about system-wide alignment, investment, policy from workforce down into the K-12 system is definitely a big opportunity here in Arizona. And so launched the Arizona Institute for Education and the Economy to do that very thing, to sit at the intersection of pre-K 12, higher ed, and workforce to, from a statewide perspective, do all we can to remove barriers, unbundle, so to speak, and give kids learning experiences that set them on a path to, as you said earlier, workforce, civic engagement, healthy, productive adult lives. And that's the opportunity that we saw and went after here in Arizona.
And is that through Northern Arizona University? So it's a newly established center. It's been around for a while.
No, newly established. We launched, we're just a year and a half old through NAU, definitely partner with U of A and ASU and other systems across the state, but definitely have a great partner in NAU.
Awesome. Whitney, what about you at ASU Prep? Similar type, connect these three sectors together, more focused on K-12. What's the challenge you're trying to solve in your world?
Yeah, I'll just say personally, so my background has been across sort of state agencies and nonprofit organizations that are working mostly in Arizona, but also nationally on education policy. And so I started as an education major, told you a little bit about how I was volunteering in schools, decided I want to be a teacher. My parents had me when they were in high school, just down the street from ASU at Tempe High. My dad never graduated from high school. College has been my personal pathway to social mobility and so impactful. And so being an ASU grad, being in education policy, watching ASU Prep from afar, live out this charter that ASU has, that we want to be known for who we include, not who we exclude, and knowing that only 1 out of 5 economically disadvantaged students in Arizona actually go straight to a 4-year degree program after they finish high school. The problem we're trying to solve is giving access to college and that opportunity for social mobility and purpose and being able to fulfill their personal dreams and goals, but also their families in achieving more for themselves and their communities and having an impact on their community. And so ASU Prep is really working to blur those lines between high school and college. And there is no college without career. Like those, just what Chad just said. Working in education policy, we talk about the pipeline all the time. We talk about it being a continuum, a lifelong continuum. ASU is pushing out beyond college and career, even lifelong learning for people who have retired. ASU Prep is really, as you mentioned in the intro, we are designing new models all over the place in Arizona to serve our students here, but also internationally working with partners, like you mentioned, Khan Academy to build out Khan World Schools. So we're trying to figure out, and really what my career has been about too, is how do you make these big ideas work for individual students? It's not just enough to pass a policy, right? Then you have to get the agencies that are implementing the policy to create the rules in a way that are true to the intent of that policy and really serving those individual students. And then you have to get these school systems, even charters that are supposed to be more fluid and flexible and unregulated, they're attached to those standards and seat time hours. I think what ASU Prep is doing is really trying to figure out how do we serve this individual student, but how do we leverage the ecosystem and the policy environment so that we can meet each student where they are.
And I love how you talked about the new models or the innovation models that ASU Prep is. And for those who don't know, you're co-locating in ASU, the university, which is different from ASU Prep, the K-12 school system. You're co-locating, so students sometimes are in, and they could be enrolled in the bricks and mortar K-12, more typical, or in your micro schools, they're operating in the college campuses, they're taking college courses, they're experiencing college life. And even more now, it sounds like partnering with local industry or local college professors. So you're playing in that unbundled system in a university system. It's a pretty unique opportunity that I've always been involved with ASU Prep and ASU. All right, Jennifer, you've heard two different challenges here. What are you focused on? What's the challenge you're trying to solve?
Arizona's economy has vastly differentiated over the last several years, and the workforce and job opportunities that are available are endless today. And when we connect with businesses at the Greater Phoenix Chamber, we often hear that they don't have the workforce they need to grow their business. And yet we have students that are graduating high school and not having an opportunity. And we always say it's not a skills gap that we have, it's an opportunity gap that we have. And Elevate Ed AZ, which is a program of the Greater Phoenix Chamber Foundation, we are trying to solve for the challenge to better prepare students for college and career. And we do that, one, by getting them into high wage, high demand CTE pathways and helping them complete those pathways, getting them early college credit and industry recognized credentials, and then getting them work-based learning experiences like internships and job shadows so that they can apply that learning and have a leg up in the workforce. And I think all of that, coupled with our educator professional development, really makes for a transformational ecosystem for our students. And we're super excited to partner not just with ASU Prep and Phoenix Union, for other school districts in that Greater Phoenix region.
And you're acting the chamber is acting as an intermediary to help connect the dots because you know the workforce well. And is that the way it's operating?
Absolutely. So we can help provide data and information as far as upcoming CTE pathways that we need to be looking at and developing. We can provide input on industry recognized credentials and ways that those have shifted over time. And then also have strong partnerships with the business community where we're able to pull those work-based learning experiences into the classroom.
Got it. So, Whitney, I want to jump back to your world. So Jennifer said they're partnering with you all. Whitney, you're talking about college, making sure there's access to college. But then there's these unbundled pieces around CTE, getting out into the world, industry recognized credentials. Does that play a role at ASU Prep as well as parallel to the college pathway? I'm trying to understand how the multiple pathways work at ASU Prep.
We're talking about like the hook here for students. Yes, many students are motivated to go to college because their parents have been telling them, like, you need to go to college, you're going to go to ASU, it's down the street, you're at ASU Prep. But also finding the why and the purpose behind what are they pursuing and why are they going to spend their time and resources going to university. And often that's because there is a career pathway that they are on that they are interested in. And so finding that career connected pathway for students while they're taking that's driving what college courses they're taking while they're with us at ASU Prep has been really instrumental in that. So even just giving some examples, you mentioned where we locate. So in addition to our 5 campuses across the Valley metro area in Arizona, we also have micro schools or what we call ASU Prep Digital Plus. So it's our online students that are participating in person project-based learning on our ASU campuses. So we have one at our ASU Tempe campus, so the main campus, one in Mesa at the Mix Center, and then on the West Valley campus as well. So then naturally, we're giving students with that proximity access to certain degree programs on those campuses and having professors come in and maybe starting off with a workshop and teaching them a little bit about the architecture program and the school and job pathways that a degree in architecture can provide you. And then those professors get really interested in working more closely with our students because they see how cool they are and how engaged and impressive they are as students. And so then they're offering courses and our students are walking across the street and sitting in a college course with them, all with the lens of now I'm really interested in what a career looks like. And so I'm going to design my high school experience that allows me to take college courses and interact with faculty on the university campus, all with the goal of eventually being in that career.
I think unbundling, so to speak, works when we don't pit college versus career. And I think that at ASU Prep, you see it with Elevate at AZ, you see it in work that I have done and work that I'm doing now, which is at the end of the day, most of us in this work, much like Whitney's personal journey, is we're trying to create social and economic mobility and opportunity for the youth that we serve here in Arizona, 1.1 million K-12 students. And when you start to see that college and career skills, competencies, mindsets are actually one and the same. Yes, we have to drive high levels of knowledge, literacy, numeracy, knowledge construction, et cetera. And at the same time that we are trying to prepare kids for the workforce, whether that's critical thinking or collaboration and all these soft skills that we talk about. And so I think when we give kids opportunity to engage in CTE, the original conversation, you actually see that CTE completers statistically actually go on to college
Yes.
and are more successful than other students that aren't CTE completers. So there's an interconnectivity between college and career that I think is really important when we talk about.
Yeah, I think it's really profound. I think that we have spent, as all of us who've been in education, right? We spent a lot of time creating a bifurcated pathway. You're going on to a trades or career, some version of that, or you're going on to college or the quote unquote academic. And what we're feeling very hopeful about is those things are combining, Chad, as you were saying, and Whitney, as you were saying. And so the idea that when you're going through college, both those things are important. I think the work around competencies and soft skills has helped with that because those are developed through both academic core courses as well as internships and experiences and apprenticeships, et cetera. So Chad, I'm going to push you a little bit more on this, so thinking about the work you're doing is, what's a specific program that you're excited about, something that's really pushing the envelope, helping explore these possibilities with the unbundled systems?
So we spent several months, Phoenix Chamber and Jennifer are part of this, spent several months building a statewide coalition that sits at the intersection of high school, higher ed, and the workforce. We just simply call this coalition H5, high school, higher ed, high wage, high skill, high demand workforce. And it's a coalition of 20 school districts, all 3 in-state universities, the 4 biggest community college systems, and chambers and CEO groups and economic development groups from all across the state. And we're coming together to look at and talk about and think about this work from a statewide perspective. What are the big P policy implications from a statewide, whether that's eventually looking at graduation requirements, course taking pathways and sequences, how we measure schools or hold schools accountable. So we have this broad coalition looking at this high school unbundling, blurring the lines from a statewide perspective, but keeping in mind that the work still happens down at the ground level. And that's why we partnered with 20 school districts to make sure that as we think about big P grass tops policy, that there's still little p local policy that matters as we think about the statewide barriers around unbundling.
Yeah. And is that partnership has just started or that coalition has just emerged?
Yeah, we had our first convening in September, had some follow-ups, have actually a reconvening next week. And it's not going to happen overnight. It's a coalition that's going to have to stay together over a few years. But very excited about the potential of that work at that intersection of K-12, higher ed, business, and industry.
Maybe that's a good segue, Jennifer, back to you, is how are the employers playing in this area? Are they saying, hey, we don't have the right people, meaning we don't have enough people to fill, the talent's not there, and then they're sitting back? Or are they actively participating? Where are you seeing the same interaction coming back down to K-12 or higher ed from the employer side?
Yeah, it's an interesting mix of employers and how they're responding to this question. Probably half of our employers will say, we can't engage with high school students because there's too much liability and we can't hire individuals that are under 18. And that is just not true. And we've had some employers that have really worked diligently to change those requirements. And very well-known, notable employers like Honeywell and Mayo Clinic have both changed their hiring requirements to allow these students to come on campus. And it didn't happen overnight. It was an evolution that when they met these students and they saw how qualified these students were and how articulate they were, they wanted them to work for them. And they weren't willing to wait the 3 months or 6 months until they turned 18 and met that requirement. And they took the leap and worked internally within their organization to change their hiring requirement. And they've made it work. And I think what's really interesting is to see the transformation of some of those employers. We've been working with Honeywell, for example, for the last 3 years, and they started with a few interns across the organization. So this is in manufacturing, quality assurance, marketing across the organization and all their business units. And they came back the first time they hired a few interns, and it was HR saying, "We're hiring interns. You're going to make this happen." Fast forward 2 years, 3 years later, and they now have their hiring managers coming to them saying, "I want more interns." And they're taking these interns and they're working with them. And they've actually used it, one, as a pipeline for talent. And so the students that they can hire right out of high school, they are, and they're offering very high wages and opportunity to learn, continue learning. The students that require that post-secondary education, they're working with them to say, okay, you go get your post-secondary education, but stay connected with us. We'll offer you summer internships as you're going through your post-secondary experience. And they want to capture them at the end of that journey. So there's a lot of value in it for them to continue to engage with these students.
Yeah, that's helpful. I think sometimes when we work nationally around this work is that employers on the surface, they really want it. They need talent, but sometimes the bureaucracy, just like in higher ed and just like in K-12, can get in the way of what, like it was a hiring policy or things along those lines. Chad, does that come up in your coalition? Do you hear that as a concern or not?
Yeah, I think to Jennifer's point, I think it'll be a concern until we hit critical mass and people realize that, in fact, businesses have been hiring teenagers for generations, by the way. And likewise, for a couple of us sharing our own stories. And I think it's a perceived barrier. I think the more that we lean in, have great examples, we realize that, as a matter of fact, it's not a barrier. And to Jennifer's point, it's both an immediate and a long-term pipeline strategy for these companies where they can fill these short-term needs, hire kids right out of high school, and or there are students that, like Honeywell, they get to go get an aeronautical engineering degree, and so they need to go to school first. But they get to come back and do summer internships and make money and pipeline themselves right back into the business. And so I think through Elevate at AZ and other partnerships, you're going to start to see critical mass. And because there's such a workforce shortage right now that people are willing to try new things and be innovative.
Whitney, back to you. Is when you're in the K-12 space, you're the one that's currently in that space. I know, Chad, you've been there before. Do students recognize this? Are they in the place where they're saying, hey, we actually want more. We want more college credit. We want more internships. Is the demand side on the students level evident, or are we as adults building it and hoping that the demand will build as students enter into the workforce? What are your thoughts on that, Whitney?
My thoughts, complicated. There are students that demand it. But of course, ASU Prep is a really interesting place to be because we have all of the above. We have a fully online digital charter school, and we have fully in-person, like comprehensive campuses serving students in K through 12. And we talk about what job you're being hired to do as a school. And if the pandemic taught us anything, is that it actually varies quite a bit depending on the family and the student and the place that they're at in their life, what they're coming to you for. So I think there is absolutely, we are seeing demand. And as we progress we are blending all of our models. So we're taking our online models where our kids are fully online and giving them opportunities to come in person and do projects in person in small groups, do experiences on campuses. And so our online students are coming in person. And as more of them do that, they share what they're learning with their peers. And then we're seeing higher demand for that. So our Digital Plus program, which is providing more different opportunities to our online students, is growing every year. Our online school is growing every year. 10% this year, fully digital program grew, which is unique amongst online programs right now, post-COVID. And then in our in-person schools as well, all of our schools have moved to what we call a hybrid model or Family Choice Friday. All of our campus schools now operate where Fridays is student and family choice, whether or not they're coming in person to campus or doing something else. It could be completely self-directed. It could be spending time with family. It could be working a job. It could be doing an internship. It could be signing up for an experience on one of our ASU campuses or one of our private sector partners. But there's a learning curve, right? Like families that have signed up at our comprehensive campus schools have signed up for an in-person 8 to 3, Monday through Friday school. And so as we are implementing this across the board, some families are still sending their kids on Friday and not taking advantage yet. But as the students come to school and are learning about what their friends are doing or the experiences they're having, the internship opportunities that they have, they want it too. So We started this school year. This is the first year that we launched Family Choice Friday across all of our campuses, all grade levels. And a couple weeks in, we have demand for more families saying, oh, actually, we want to be home on Fridays too. Our students want to be home on Fridays. They want to be signing up for some of these cool opportunities that you're providing. And so we're like, okay, you can sign up for next quarter. We can't be switching week to week. But so I think it's one of those things that as we're seeing both in state, nationally, as we're seeing, I think policy nerds think everybody wants to unbundle and know how to go out and leverage all of these opportunities and the resources that you have. Part of the advantage, the huge advantage that we're trying to articulate to families right now is if you're doing college while you're in high school, it is free if you're at ASU Prep. That is saving tens of thousands of dollars if you're taking advantage. You can start taking college courses as a freshman at ASU Prep. And so it's a learning curve. So as more, I think some of us on the policy side expect to see even more families, and you're looking at something like ESA enrollment, and you'd expect demand to be more than just the traditional homeschoolers or the traditional private school students, that we would see more students in the middle. And that's slower. The growth in that is slower than what we would expect, but it is there. We are seeing, and especially the opportunities to earn credit in jobs. That's huge. I know that's a policy that a lot of states have been trying to figure out for the last few years. It's like, how do we give students credit for work that they're doing? I shadowed a senior at one of our schools in South Phoenix last week, and someone asked the students to raise their hand if you have a job outside of school. It was like at least 75% of the kids raised their hand. We should be giving them credit, but has policy caught up to that? Do we know how to do it? Do we know how to put it on a transcript? Are we making them track hours? All of those things. So I think it's just we learn and iterate as we go. And it's the more that students are seeing these opportunities that other kids are having for more flexibility and opportunities while they're in high school, making high school more relevant for them and more valuable for them, for sure we are seeing demand grow.
And I think to Whitney's last comments, that's the work of the Institute and others, is to make sure that policy catches up. So that, yes, there's demand, especially if kids can earn. If they can earn credit or earn money, there's a ton of demand in high school. Sometimes it's just the policy that lags behind. What does that look like on a transcript? How do you track hours? And so I think there's a lot of folks, ASU Prep, the Institute, Elevate Ed, and many others, try to make sure that these new innovative models and opportunities come up, that in fact we are following that with the right policy to make it possible and more accessible.
I can just jump in here too, Nate. We have more students that have expressed interest in internships than we have placements available. So we need more employers that lean in and support our high school students with internship and other work-based learning experiences. Additionally, we've done a lot of work specifically with Phoenix Union, Mesa Public Schools, to really break down barriers for students trying to enroll in dual enrollment. And these are things like bringing Maricopa community liaisons into the classroom and really working with them on the registration process, thinking holistically about ways that we can cover tuition and trying to remove that barrier. And as a result, the first year we saw a 40% increase in dual enrollment registration. This year, we're really excited to say it was a 15% increase. So we're seeing that when you actually break down some of those barriers, that you do have higher outcomes.
Yeah. I want to jump to this barriers question in a second. I just want to call out, amplify this Family Choice Fridays. I'm not sure there's any district in the country that's doing this. Kudos to you all just introducing new learning models, but this idea of creating choices that are not just, we're seeing a lot of districts go to 4-day weeks, of course, but you're doing that in a modified way. So living up to your vision of new school models in all sorts of ways. Chad, let's go back to you. You brought up policy. Let's think about the things that you would love to get out of the way, the policy barriers or even other barriers that showed up when you were at Phoenix Union as a superintendent or now in your current position. What are the things? Arizona's done a lot, but what else needs to be done? Or is the ecosystem set up policy-wide? It's just a matter of just pushing the participants. What do you think, Chad?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's a little bit of both of those. I will just jump off, comment Whitney on these Family Choice Fridays. The new model of education does require more student agency and family agency. And that's both a challenge and an opportunity. We want to build agency amongst our students. But no longer is it just, I'm going to go to school Monday through Friday, freshman through senior year, and just take the classes assigned to me. What we're telling students and families to do is to say, hey, what do you need? And what do you want? And what's going to drive you? And what career are you interested in? What college pathway do you want to be in? And so all of this unbundling requires much more student agency. And therefore, schools have to be willing to teach that, coach that, be patient with that, communicate that. So I think that's critically important. I do think that yes, there are some barriers, but there's also some things we've already removed here in Arizona. Arizona has an instructional time model, HB 2862, that does allow a lot of student learning to take place off campus, not inside the bells and walls of school. And so that we know it as the ITM, again, the instructional time model. There's already a ton of flexibility. We need to teach people how to use that better, show models, get playbooks. And so I think there's a lot already on the books. And to your question of what else needs to change, one thing that the Institute has been clear about, and we don't know the exact answer to this, which is still today in Arizona and in most states, high school graduation is just one size fits all. Mm-hmm. You go to high school, even if you unbundle, we still tell kids, you can unbundle all you want, but your transcript still needs to show 4 of these and 4 of these and 3 of these and 3 of these. And the reality is kids don't all fit in one box. And they all have different passions and interests and pathways. And each pathway can be equally rigorous. But we are very clear in this coalition that we are open to not just one graduation pathway, but multiple, to honor the skills and interests, abilities of different students, different schools, different communities.
Jennifer, I'm going to jump to you in a second around sort of the barrier or the major things you want to get out of the way. I just want to, again, highlight this idea of agency is great, and we're asking more of students and parents and even teachers and school leaders as we think about it, we're unbundled a lot of options. But Chad, as you said, we have a very robust 100-year history of developing compliance-based education. And so every participant, from parent to student to teacher to school leader, is a compliance-based person. And so that's a mind shift and a change that I really think is important that you mentioned. So Jennifer, to you, what are the things that are getting in your way or your organization's way to making your mission become a reality?
Yeah, I think there's a variety of things that present barriers to students. And the biggest one and the hardest one to tackle, I think, is the family perception of a student's pathway, right? And a lot of times students don't see themselves, their families don't see themselves as college bound. And so they remove any sort of post-secondary opportunities as an opportunity for them. And so we've got to debunk that myth that not all students have the ability to go to post-secondary education. At the same time, I do think there are some policy things that we could do that would be transformative, especially for our underserved students. And one thing that we were successful in getting through 2 years ago now was some $15 million in funding for tuition assistance for low-income students for dual enrollment. And unfortunately, due to the budget restraints, that was pulled back last year. We need that outcome-based funding to drive educational achievement for our students. We need to break down and remove as many barriers as possible. So that's one low-hanging fruit. We know that students that participate in dual enrollment are more likely to enroll in post-secondary education and more likely to persist in that education as well. So I think it's a key indicator. If we could do something similar around credentials and make sure that every student is leaving high school with a credential to put them on a track and give them some currency to go into employment, that would be another great barrier to remove.
Yeah, and that ties back into this. If they all had IRCs as a graduation requirement, oftentimes we're seeing the graduation requirements nationally as IRC or dual enrollment or college prep or a whole set of lists. But if we actually force them, say everybody needs some sort of IRC and everybody needs some sort of dual enrollment credit, that might be helpful. So Whitney, finish us off here. So we've talked about changing high school graduation requirements, making them more flexible, thinking about family perception, TA for dual enrollment, so it's outcome-based funding, and every sort of opportunities for every student in terms of credential receiving. What else would you add to that list?
Oh, those are great. And I feel like there's so many things to talk about here. And come on, haven't we fixed that already? Like seat time, even in Arizona, our online schools, Arizona online instruction schools, it is purely seat time is how their funding is calculated, which sounds crazy because you're like, digital, they're remote, but the students have to log hours and submit those hours for the school to actually generate ADM funding. Same thing, Jennifer, you're talking about how do we get funding for the dual enrollment. At ASU Prep, our students take concurrent enrollment. They enroll either in ASU online courses, ASU in person, or in the universal learner credits. And we use their ADM funding to pay their portion of tuition. But like, how do you break that up? How do you make it easier for that to happen for school districts that are receiving the full funding for the students? Uncoupling, as we offer our online courses and opportunities to private school students, whether that's students who are using ESA or not, just self-funding. How do we uncouple those minutes required of our online students in our charter school for the students who are private pay tuition payers? So like intertwining, like even the Family Choice Friday example that we brought up, we're using that instructional time model that Chad mentioned to do that. We didn't move to a 4-day school week. We are still a 5-day school week. It's just that 5th day is happening remote. How you account for attendance, God bless our folks in records and attendance here at ASU Prep who are figuring out ways to force fit what we're doing into the existing models. Even when you have a state like Arizona that's like the legislature's, you give me the reform, we'll pass it. It's still really hard. And it gets down to technology. This state, our districts, our systems really have not leveraged technology to its full potential when it comes to serving kids and delivering education. Even in our online programs that we have AI tutors and all these things, we're still trying to figure out like, how do we get all of the data across these learning management systems into one dashboard that teachers can use immediately? And so I think it's hard because everyone's heads down in the work trying to give students access to the standards so that they can pass the state testing every year while also trying to change the model to serve kids based on what they need and get funded for it so we can actually provide the education. Worth noting as well, when it comes to all these unbundled models, transportation is such a barrier. And so one of the huge transportation grants that the prior governor of Arizona put some COVID dollars into, those have been instrumental for us at ASU Prep and getting our students to ASU campus, to these experiences. And we are worried about that funding going away and the limitations that our families are going to have who without that transportation funding. And it's expensive for an individual student, especially a student maybe that has disabilities and has to commute on their own from far distances. It can be thousands of dollars a year. And so the funding, the seed time, all these things have to be working together. But yeah, how do we leverage technology to better actually make these things work?
The transportation, we talk a lot about Unbundled. All of us are in the space and thinking about how do we provide more opportunities. But transportation is such a hallmark of we pick up kids, we bring them to one place. We don't do anything for the rest of the day. We do that at the end of the day. And so solutions for that and the technology as well. We've been going for over 45 minutes. It's been really interesting to hear all of you. I know we could go on for longer. I just want to close by just sharing a few highlights. Definitely a lot of good information that'll be in the show notes as well. And so number one is just this idea of we all of you have continued to say we need to better connect the higher ed, the K-12, and the workforce. And we're seeing also with all three of the organizations that you're working for that happening. I love this concept of taking big ideas and making sure it impacts individual students. I think, Chad, you mentioned that. It's easy to dream big, but we really have to practice and test and pilot. So the coalition or ASU Preps, the Digital Plus models that you're talking about, or Jennifer, your partnerships, all are testing these ideas at the student level. Unbundling works when we don't pick college versus career. This is a broader theme that we've talked about in different podcasts, is that we need hundreds of pathways for all the students to make sure that they're following something that's important for them. On the employer side, Jennifer, I like what you said about just the modifications, how they engage, and when they make changes on their side, that helps increase demand. It helps increase opportunity for students, and the fact that we need more of it because more and more students want internships and can benefit from them. And this idea of compliance versus agency, this is a theme that's come up in a lot of our podcasts of we're creating agency-filled education systems as we move into this next era of education. And we need to actually think about that in terms of mindsets and how that changes how we think about the concept of school, which has been so compliance based. And then at the end, you all listed a bunch of policy things of changing high school graduation requirements to make them more broad, family perception, Whitney, technology, and the transportation challenges. And this confounding thing about seat timing, the fact that online students are logging hours is such a relic of an archaic compliance system. But yet we see this across the country, right? It's a Carnegie unit challenge. And most states, in fact, all states have laws that you don't need to, that can get around that, but the systems are still not getting around it, right? As you're indicating. So really appreciate all the hard work you three are doing in the space. Appreciate your time sharing today. And feel free, for those who are listening, take a look at all these links and make sure you reach out to Jennifer, Whitney, and Chad if you have more questions. So thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Nate.
Thanks for tuning in to the Getting Smart podcast today. We want this podcast to be actionable, insightful, and a great way to learn about what's next in learning. In order to stay on the cutting edge, we need people in the field to tell us what they're hearing, what they're wanting, and what they're needing to learn more about. Got a topic or a guest in mind? Send your recommendations to me, Mason at gettingsmart.com. And if you like what you're hearing, don't forget to leave a review in Apple Podcasts or subscribe wherever you listen. Feel free to share the podcast on social media using the hashtag GSPodcasts. Thanks so much.